Welcome to Think Aside. Today we are doing something a little bit differently. I am recording a video and I'm also streaming it on a site called Trovo. Anyone who's listening, thank you for listening. Today I'm talking about something that I think we all kind of think about a little bit, but it's a little bit, I don't know, it's something that I think at times are kind of afraid to kind of hear, so to speak. So there's a phrase that I really like from Tom Bilyeu, I think is how you pronounce his last name. I always get it wrong. But he says, everything is my fault. I believe is what he said. It might have said everything or things are always my fault, or it's always my fault, or something to that effect anyway. And it's an interesting thing to think that like everything is your fault, right? Because like when we hear that, we immediately think like that we're at fault, that that's bad because we did something wrong. And though that is kind of true, we did something wrong, it doesn't mean that it's bad that we did something wrong. I would argue that when we recognize that we did something wrong, it means that we can make it right. I mean, that's what they say, right? It's like with failure, with success. You don't fail unless you stop trying. Once you stop trying, then that's when you've failed, you've given up. Like then you're never going to be successful. And so that's something I wanted to talk about, is like the idea of admitting that we're wrong and that it's okay that we're wrong. Because the idea is to improve. The idea is to continue to do better in life. And if we don't admit that we've done something wrong, then we can't admit that we can do something right. Kind of counterintuitive, I suppose, but it's interesting how that works. I think it's a weird thing to think that I'm at fault for doing this, and then seeing how can we improve. So here's an example. Here's what sparked all of this, right? Is I think in life a lot of the times we make decisions and things happen to us, and we just say like, well, shit's just happening. You know what I mean? It's not under our control. We can't do anything about it. It's just the way it is, and as a result, we have to live with it. So we get into this mindset that because things are happening to us, we must just be unlucky. We must just be the way our lives are gonna go, right? It's like we're just gonna deal with unfortunate consequences all the time. Things are never gonna work out for us. And I think that's a dangerous thing, because it doesn't have to be that way. You see it all the time with people that are successful. It's not like yes, you could argue they're a little bit lucky, but that wasn't the driving factor. Their action was the factor, right? And how did they act? Well, you could argue that a lot of that came down to being persistent, believing in themselves, having the confidence to take that moment of do I do it, don't I do it, and say, yes, I'm going to do it, I'm going to try. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink. And so I think that's a pretty cool thing to realize, is that like we don't have to live our lives in a way thinking that things are just going to happen to us no matter what. I think it's cool to realize that like we truly can make a difference. And so an example for me was I wanted to increase my credit. Right, I needed some sort of credit history. Oftentimes I just paid things in cash. Did not like the idea of being in debt, and so I just didn't have any credit whatsoever. But that was running into problems, right? Because I was unable to buy a house. I wasn't able to, if I wanted to apply for certain things and I needed a credit history, for instance, like Amazon Turk, it's like a website that you can do like little data management or data entry jobs. I couldn't do that because when I ran my social security number on their website, they acted like I didn't exist. And they locked my account and said I couldn't pretty much work for them. And I think that had to do with, I don't know for a fact, but not having a credit history, not seemingly existing. And so for me, I ended up deciding, okay, well, I'm running into issues here, so I'm going to get a credit card. So I applied, I did a little bit of research and found the Capital One card. It was like a $500 limit, very minimal. And I was able to get that credit card, get approved for it. And so then from there, I researched, how do I build my credit with this credit card without maxing out my debt, and it ended up affecting me. You know what I mean? Ending up affecting me. And so I did that, and I wrote it at like $200, $300 around there, something like that. And that worked really well. It started to build my credit. And so from there, I was able to eventually, I tried applying for a loan for a house and tried to buy a house. And they told me, these are the things that you have that are good. These are the things that you have that haven't passed off. And so I asked them, what do I do? What do I need to do in order to get there? Excuse me. And they listed them off to me, and I kind of figured out how long it would take. It would take me, I think, like a year or 2 months or something to that effect. It was going to be a while. I mean, a year's a long time. At least it seems to be a long time. It seems like it is until you look back and you're like, wow, this year's gone fast, right? Like, I think that's kind of an interesting thing, time, and the way we perceive it is it went by quicker after the fact. But anyway, and so I was curious how to accomplish this whenever, and I researched it, and then time came where I was doing everything I was supposed to, in the year and whatever passed, and I called the bank up and I said, hey, listen, I'm looking for the loan again, I want to apply again. And they said, okay, yeah, we can run your thing, and it's like an application, give them your social and some general information, whatever, and they ran it, and they approved me. And now it wasn't like I was extremely lucky. It wasn't like I just was super smart and I was able to do it, or I was making a lot of money so I could do it, or you know what I mean? It wasn't like this random happenstance where I was just privileged to have it happen to me. Like, was I privileged to have the knowledge to be able to accomplish the tasks by having the time, the money, things like that? Yeah, sure, I was privileged. I think we all are in one way or another, but the action overruled the luck. It overruled the bad luck, right? There very well probably is a force that's working against us in everything we do. I think that makes sense. It's like for every equal force for every force there's an equally an opposing force, I believe is how that goes, the law of physics. And so to recognize that like, yes, there is a force going against you, but you have to work with that. You have to be aware of that, and you have to prepare for it, and then you have to work past it, work through it, push forward. And so going back to everything as our fault, I think that's an important thing to realize. And so in that scenario, if I had, say, I went super into debt, and with the credit card, I didn't have any self-control. I spent all of it. I maxed it out at 500, had a grand old time, right? Went to the bar and whatever else, bought a PlayStation, like all of these things. And then 6 months later, when I could have been applying for a home and finding out that I needed a few more steps, I could have been applying for a home and finding out that my credit score was, if there was negative, I don't know if there is, I don't think so, but I had negative 500, you know what I mean? Like I had zero. And that could have happened. That absolutely could have happened if I had done those things. And then from there, would I have said, what the heck? Like, how did this happen to me? I don't understand. Like, these people over there are so lucky that they were able to buy a house because they're just super well off. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. Yeah, I could have done that. I could have made up excuses. Like, I don't have self-control. It's not easy for me. Or, I was having a hard time and I couldn't save the money to pay it off, or whatever. Or I could have said, this is my fault. I'm in debt because I decided to spend that money, right? And so with that being the case, like if I made that decision right then and there to be aware that it was me, that I made that decision to do it, then all at once I'm gonna be like, okay, so I made this decision. Why did I choose to do that? How can I do it differently next time? And then I can improve upon that. Like, yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder now because I've already made those mistakes. And that's how it is with anything, right? It's like the idea, like I said a minute ago, with failing. Like, failing is only failing if you don't get back up. It's the same idea. The part that sucks about failing or falling, whatever, misstepping, is for every time you do that, it takes longer to get to your destination. And so I might have, in that scenario, messed up my credit so bad that it's going to take me an extra year to get there. But I can still get there. I don't need to continue to self-sabotage myself. I could just continue trying and doing the things that I've learned that I need to do. I take responsibility. I blame it on myself, not the universe, not some random thing that's happened to me, right? Like, I take responsibility for it. I say it is my fault that this happened to me. And then from there, I'm able to figure out, like, what did I do wrong, right? Like, I take control. And that's the interesting thing about blaming it on yourself, is you can't control anyone else. You can't control the universe. You can't control what the person next door is doing. You can't control the weather. You can't control how much money is gonna be printed. Like, you can't control any of that. But what you can control are your actions, your decisions. You can control what how do I put that? How you interact with the world, right? If the world was a bunch of gears and levers, you can choose which ones to pull instead of closing your eyes and pulling random ones because it seems fun. And the next thing you know, it's falling apart. Your world is falling apart. So I think that's an important factor of everything is my fault, accepting that, you know, things very much happen because we, to some extent, will them to happen. We allow them to happen. There are scenarios where, of course, that isn't completely the case, where the exterior force beats our force. That happens. But we can still control how strong that force is by controlling how strong our force is, right? Like, you can do it from a physical comparison. If you were to learn how to box and a boxer came and tried to fight you, you're more likely to win, at least defend yourself, if you've also been boxing, if you've been preparing for that scenario. Just as if, the credit cards or buying a house. If you apply to buy a house and you haven't been preparing with getting your credit up, then chances are they're going to run your credit score and they're going to say that you have a low number. Now again, are you going to blame that on yourself because you didn't increase it, or are you going to blame it on whatever circumstances caused you to make the decision not to pay your credit card or whatever? It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to take responsibility for our actions. I think it's something that we're not really taught anymore. You can put religion into it, and I think religion has an aspect of it, is that people who are raised in religion, they tend to be a lot more conscious of their decisions and how the consequences might affect them positively or negatively. And I don't know all the reasons for that, but I do think that religions tend to force that more, the idea of positive, negative, good, bad. They play on the natural bodies or minds need, I guess you could say, to judge. Like, we constantly need to know for survival, right? It only makes sense that we would see something and we say good, bad, right? Our mind decides, and then if it's good, then okay, we can relax. Other than, like, okay, it's bad, so now I need to be kind of confrontational. I say confrontational, but not necessarily like inciting violence, but still being kind of like, I don't know if I'm okay with this, being on the defense versus the passive side. Being aware that you can change more than what you thought you could, and trying to do that, I think you'll prove yourself wrong that you couldn't change it. And then once you start doing that, I think it becomes easier and easier. You start to realize that, like, you're playing the game instead of the game being played. And that's kind of my way of putting. There's a quote. Know the rules to the game, because if you don't, you're the game being played, is effectively what it says. I added words to it, but I think it's very true in this scenario. Is like we have to take we take that responsibility, we say it's our fault, and then we roll the dice and we move our piece. We decide what the rule is on that parking place, that we're just there for a moment. Meanwhile, there's a group of people that have been there for 20 years because they don't know how to get past it, right? But I think that's it for my video, and so I want to thank you for listening, and I will probably edit some of this, but have a great day, and remember, everything is your fault. Nah, not everything.